3 enforcers died in 4 months. Wade Belak was the last. The fists weren't the problem. The fear was. You bury it so deep you forget it's there. Then the career ends, and it all comes back. Here's how the NHL's toughest role destroyed a man everyone thought was fine.
He was fine with it because he wanted to stay up in the NHL and have this career.
Born in Saskatoon, moved to Battleford, Saskatchewan at 6. Small town, cold rinks, a kid with a stick dreaming the same dream every Canadian boy dreams. 1994 NHL Draft, Quebec Nordiques, 12th overall, first round. That's not a flyer on potential, that's a statement. Wade Belak was supposed to be something, but the NHL had other plans. He wasn't fast enough to be a scorer, wasn't smooth enough to be a playmaker, so he became the guy nobody wants to be, and every team needs. The enforcer, the one who drops the gloves so the stars don't have to. 549 games, 5 teams. Colorado, Calgary, Toronto, Florida, Nashville. 14 seasons of professional hockey. His stat line? 8 goals. 1,263 penalty minutes. That tells you everything you need to know about the job description. Off the ice? Different story. He married Jennifer Russell in 2002. 2 daughters followed, Andy, then Alex. By all accounts, Wade was the father who couldn't put down his kids. Always holding them, always present. And when the body started breaking down, he didn't disappear. He pivoted. TV work in Canada, a radio show in Nashville, funny on camera, quick in interviews, the kind of personality that translates. In the summer of 2011, he was set to appear on CBC's Battle of the Blades. New chapter, new identity, a life after fighting. From the outside, it looked like Wade Belak had figured it out and made it through. Built something real. Wade Belak dropped the gloves 136 times in the NHL. Most fights were over in under 20 seconds. 20 seconds of absorbing punches to the skull from men just as big, just as desperate to keep their roster spots. Then you bleed from your knuckles or your face, skate to the penalty box, sit there while the crowd roars, and wait to do it again. Sometimes in the same period. The unspoken contract is brutal in its clarity. You're not paid to score. You're not paid to set up plays. You're paid to make sure the guys who score feel safe. You absorb the punishment so they don't have to. You're the shields, and shields are replaceable. Georges Laraque was one of the most feared enforcers in NHL history. After Wade's passing, he described what the job actually felt like from the inside. I did it because it was my job, but I hated it. I hated to fight. I hated the pressure. I hated to be called a goon and an animal. But the worst part wasn't the fighting itself. Laraque explained the weight that enforcers carry every single day. It's the night before, the day of the game. It's the shivers, the worry in the head. You go to a movie and you can't watch it because you're thinking about having to fight Derek Bugard. That fear doesn't go away after the game ends. You just learn to bury it somewhere deep. So deep that eventually you forget it's even there. You convince yourself you're fine because the alternative is admitting you're not built for the only thing keeping you employed. But what happens when the fighting finally stops and everything you've buried is still there, waiting? The fighting stopped in 2011, and Wade Belak was 35 years old with a body that had absorbed a career's worth of violence. But here's what nobody tells you about enforcers. The hardest part isn't surviving the career, it's surviving the exit. When a goal scorer retires, he loses his purpose. He mourns the game, the competition, the rush of putting the puck in the net. But an enforcer, he loses something deeper. He loses his identity. The only thing that made you valuable to an NHL roster was your willingness to take punishment so others didn't have to. And now, nobody needs that from you anymore. The phone stops ringing. The role that defined your entire adult life is simply gone. On paper, Wade was doing everything right. The media career was taking shape. He was set to appear on Battle of the Blades that fall. A fresh start in front of cameras instead of penalty boxes. It looked like the perfect soft landing, but the body was falling apart underneath the surface. Arthritis had settled into his pelvis so severely that he needed cortisone injections just to function, and each injection sidelined him for days at a time. On February 25, 2011, the Nashville Predators placed him on waivers. not a single team in the league claimed him. 11 days later, on March 8th, Wade officially retired. And the thing he'd spent 14 years burying deep inside himself, it didn't retire with him. His mother, Lorraine, later confirmed that Wade had been battling depression. TSN host Michael Landsberg, who shared his own struggles with the condition, revealed that Wade had told him he'd been on antidepressants for 4 to 5 years. Wade had a name for them. He called them happy pills. The one who convinced teammates, reporters, and friends that he was fine, he was fighting something he couldn't punch his way out of. Something that didn't care how tough you were or how many times you'd dropped the gloves. Have you ever gotten so good at hiding how you feel that even you forgot what you actually felt? To understand what happened to Wade Belak, you have to understand what the NHL looked like in 2011. Mental health wasn't a conversation anyone was having. It was viewed as a weakness, especially among the men whose entire value came from appearing unbreakable. You didn't talk about depression in an NHL locker room. You didn't mention the headaches that wouldn't stop or the mood swings you couldn't explain. You kept your mouth shut and did your job. The science was just starting to catch up with what these men had endured. CTE was entering the sports conversation for the first time, but almost entirely through football. The NFL was getting sued by former players whose brains had been damaged by years of collisions. But hockey? Hockey was still in denial. The league wasn't ready to admit that the men who fought for a living might be paying a price that extended far beyond bruised knuckles and broken noses. After Wade's passing, his brain was examined by researchers. The diagnosis confirmed what many had feared: CTE, the same degenerative brain disease found in Derek Boogaard, the same condition later identified in Rick Rippon. All three had the same damage hidden inside their skulls. The men who took the most punishment on the ice were the least equipped, medically, culturally, structurally, to deal with what that punishment left behind. Michael Landsberg described the impossible contradiction that defined his friend. Wade had an unbelievable ability to appear to be the happiest guy in the room, when in fact, he was the sickest guy in the room. Nick Kyprios, a former enforcer who lived near Wade during his Toronto years, explained why these conversations never happened between fighters. You don't really discuss your inner feelings about the job description with another guy who fights. You just know. That silence wasn't just cultural, it was survival. Admitting you were struggling meant admitting you might not be able to do the job anymore. And for an enforcer, the job was everything. The hardest part of Wade's story isn't that he hid his pain. It's that he was finally starting to talk about it. He told Landsberg about the medication. He acknowledged the struggle. He was trying. And that's what makes everything that followed so much harder to sit with. Wade arrived in Toronto on July 18, 2011. Battle of the Blades was waiting. The CNBC show that paired hockey players with professional figure skaters for a competition that had become a hit with Canadian audiences. Producers matched him with Kim Navarro, an American ice dancer, and the two met for the first time in the hotel lobby. They ended up talking for hours that night. Wade telling her about Nashville, about his broadcast work, about his family. Navarro walked away thinking this was going to be a really fun experience. For the next several weeks, Wade bounced between obligations. Skating rehearsals in Toronto, media commitments, and maintaining the connections he'd built across the hockey world. Friends who saw him during this stretch said he seemed like himself. Energetic, engaged, cracking jokes the way he always did. At 11:29 p.m. on August 30th, Wade texted Jeremy Benefield, a Nashville radio producer he'd been working with. The message was simple: I'll be there on Friday nights. He was planning to tape a show that weekend. Later that night, he was spotted at a bar called Underground Garage on King Street West in downtown Toronto. Witnesses say he left around 2 a.m. in good spirits. Nothing that suggested anything was wrong. The next morning, Wade was scheduled for a radio interview with TSN. The cab arrived at his hotel to pick him up. He wasn't there. Staff at the network assumed he'd forgotten or had something else come up. At approximately 1:40 p.m. on August 31st, 2011, hotel staff at 1 King Street West entered Wade Belak's condo to check on him. They found him unresponsive. He was 35 years old. His passing came just 16 days after Rick Rippon was found in his Alberta home, 3.5 months after Derek Boogaard was discovered in his Minneapolis apartment. 3 enforcers, 1 summer, all of them under 40, all of them gone. The hockey world didn't just mourn. It went quiet in a different way. The kind of quiet that settles over people when they realize they might have missed something that they should have seen. The people who saw him hours before saw nothing alarming, and yet the NHL could no longer pretend this was a coincidence. Within days of Wade's passing, the league and the NHLPA released a joint statement that acknowledged what everyone was thinking. These tragic events cannot be ignored. We are committed to examining the factors that may have contributed. For the first time, the conversation shifted from hushed whispers to official policy. The league expanded its mental health and substance abuse programs, dedicating more resources to players struggling with issues that had previously been dismissed as personal weakness. Teams across the league started hiring sports psychologists, recognizing that players needed support beyond trainers and equipment managers. Former enforcers began speaking publicly about what they had endured. George Laraque talked openly about seeking therapy after his career ended. Chris Nyland, who had battled addiction after years as one of the most feared fighters in hockey, became a mental health advocate. The silence that had protected locker rooms for decades finally started to crack. At Wade's funeral in Nashville, Ty Domi spoke about what needed to change. This has to do with depression and getting the right message out there. Depression can be beat. Wade was alone, and he can't be alone when you have these things going on. Over the next decade, the enforcer role diminished across the league. Rule changes made fighting less central to the game. Rosters got faster, more skilled, and less reliant on intimidation. The cost of employing men whose primary job was absorbing violence became undeniable. Not just financially, but morally. The men who came before Wade paid for that shift with their bodies and their minds. They don't get to see the change they made possible. Wade Belak wasn't a cautionary tale. He was a father who couldn't put his daughters down, a teammate who made every locker room lighter, a man who fought for his team every night while fighting something else entirely alone. Michael Landsberg wrote something that stays with me. Fine. It's 4 letters, 1 word. Fine doesn't always mean fine. He wasn't fine. 7 days later, he was gone. He was trying. It wasn't enough. That's the part we have to sit with. Before we go, a huge thank you to some of the community members who make this channel worth showing up for. Visually Impaired Gamer 1987, Rebel TBR 6046, Danny Avery 5578, Weibo Show, and Daryl Sutter's favorite cow. You know who you are, and so do we. This channel exists because of people like you. If this story meant something to you, we've enabled super thanks on this video. It's the best way to support what we do here. Every contribution goes directly into telling the next story that needs to be told. Subscribe to Skates and Scars, the stories the league never wanted told.